best results are obtained with a sound card. No shit, Sherlock. On rare occasion, a game comes along that absolutely rips off another game in complete form, but is so good on its own that it stands up right against the original, and everybody dismisses the fact that it was a copy of another game. And through time, it may even be so good that people claim that it is the original. Now, Arkanoid comes to mind in that vein. Arkanoid was a clone of Breakout, but Arkanoid was so good that the many games that followed Arkanoid were often called Arkanoid clones, not Breakout clones. That is what happens when a game is just so special. When it ups the ante of the original, it takes it to a level beyond. A game that transcends. Now, this is Eye of the Beholder, released in 1991 for DOS and Amiga, developed simultaneously in-house by Westwood Associates in Las Vegas, Nevada. Yes, an American Amiga game, everybody. Plenty of them. And when you come across those games, please do the original artists respect by putting your emulators and machines into NTSC mode, so you will get the proper speed in the proper 4:3 aspect ratio as all Americans saw them. The game was published by Strategic Simulations Incorporated, same company responsible for the Gold Box games. Very impressive RPGs of the time. This one takes it into the 3D dungeon crawl area, one pioneered by a classic Dungeon Master. Now, that was released in 1987 for the Atari ST, quickly a port to the Amiga followed, which was just a little bit better with a stereo sound and such. And it should be noted that even Dungeon Master was making what was previously available, doing it in its own unique way, that it got credit for a lot of things. It wasn't the first dungeon crawl by any means. Ultima was before it. Might and Magic, all these games, were before Dungeon Master, and they featured the 3D dungeon crawling perspective. But Dungeon Master, how did it change things? It made it real-time combat. That is where Dungeon Master made everything just a little bit different, up the ante. Now, while we create and meet our party of adventurers, shot Jakku, Stygian, and Life School, we will look at some pages in the Eye of the Beholder manual. I have investigated your concerns, my friend, and I'm afraid the news is not good. More than that, it is maddening and frustrating. The signs of evil are clear, as you know, and growing. Before I left, I heard rumors of assassins in the city by Tyr. In Waterdeep. I'm not sure what to believe anymore. I have visited both Am and Kalmancham. These cities have given us trouble in the past. I suspect that our problems might now be their doing, but I find no evidence of it. My informants seem clear on this point, at least. None have even heard of our elusive Xanathar. No. These traces of evil are not from outside Waterdeep, but from within. Or perhaps below. My magics did detect the evil, but not its source. All of our attempts to find its cause have been for naught. The only thing we have learned is that the name Xanathar recurs with grave persistence. Where have we not looked, Pallas, my friend? Where is it the City Watch never patrol? Where would you hide from the Watch and the Lords of Waterdeep without leaving the area of the city? I can only think that we are overlooking something under our very noses. I will return to the Council soon. My investigations here are clearly fruitless. But do not wait for me. Hire adventurers, as the others have suggested. They may not have our biases. Perhaps a new outlook will help your trusted friend, Kelvin. The sewers. I would hide in the sewers, and that is where I think you should start. He hands you an official document with the seal of Waterdeep. prominently displayed commission and letter of mark. This document is a binding commission of service. The lords and sovereign city of Waterdeep, the bearers of this document, are agents of the lords of Waterdeep and are granted full rights of passage beneath the city of Waterdeep. Any who would dare interfere risk the full penalty of our wrath. Information has been presented to us that there is a plot afoot in our city. Evidence points to the sewers that run beneath Waterdeep. We have no information about the exact nature of the threat, but we feel the urgency is great. We commission you to find the nature of the danger and to destroy it, if you are able. You are granted full rights of mark. All treasures, artifacts, or other valuables are yours by right of conquest. This writ is made legal and binding by our mark on this 5th day, Marpenoth, in the year of shadows. Now, SSI had the rights to the TSR Dungeons and Dragons rule set, unlike a lot of other games in the time period, which would, kind of cheat their way through it in honor of or in outright theft of. These are the real ones. This is a real advanced Dungeons and Dragons computer product. It is the first to go off the 2nd edition rules. All of the gold box games were based off the 1st edition. A word on party creation. This game, like the gold box games, make it very easy to modify your characters to give them levels that are not based on the dice rolls. So, if you're going to give me that option, I'm always going to I'm gonna make it max. These games are fairly unforgiving. Although I will say, now that I've played this game, I've probably completed it like 4 or 5 times now in my life, and this was the easiest time. So it's starting to make me feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing those 18 kind of stats for the strength and stuff, but maybe not, because the second game it might get a little harder. This one, I remember this one being incredibly hard without those modifiers. My feeling is they shouldn't even be in the game. Might and Magic never did that. You had to roll your dice, but then again, in Might and Magic, you'd be sitting there for an hour or two rolling your dice until you got the stats that you wanted. So, I don't know. Make me roll the dice, but then let me change the stats. Okay, so if I have a stat of 18 for and that's an intelligence, let me change that to the strength or something. That's how a lot of the other ones did it. They did it better. This game just lets you modify them to your heart's content. Just max them all out. Well, it's not cheating if it's built in like that, and I've always maxed them out, so I'll give no shit to anybody else that wishes to do the same. Now, this is a real-time combat kind of a game, and some people, once they went this way, they all started. Now, Dungeon Master was the first, but while it inspired a lot of other ones, they didn't just all go the Dungeon Master route at first. It took them a long time, especially with the gold box games being very hot selling for quite a number of years, and those were turn-based. Eye of the Beholder here was the game changer. Once this one came out, it was a very quick decline of the more traditional turn-based combats, and eventually they would be no more. Now, how much you enjoy this game really depends on your feelings about turn-based versus real-time combat. I'm a fan of the turn-based stuff. Now, I'll always have a special place in my heart for this game, which does it so well, but I lament the fact that this spelled the end of my lovely turn-based combat gold box games, which, this game was the direct result of magazines complaining that the gold box games they just didn't innovate. They were the same thing. They were wonderful, but you just didn't change them up enough. They were just the same game engine, And finally, when they did up the ante in terms of graphics, it was still the same game engine. They just put some more colors on top of it. SSI was just too damn slow with updating the gold box engines to something a little more prettier. And I believe all they really had to do was up the ante in terms of that style, and they could have continued on. Obviously, Baldur's Gate, imagine the Baldur's Gate interface, but, turn-based instead of real-time. If they would have maybe put that out just a little bit beforehand, that would have been wonderful, a wonderful thing. Now, you see me placing this rock on this pressure plate here. This is one of the many puzzles that are in this game. We're in the sewer, so this particular door is not designed to open unless there's a certain amount of water in the sewers, which there's not. But you put some weight on that pressure plate, then the door can open. Some of the puzzles that go on in this game, many more puzzles when compared to gold box games, which very light on the puzzles, although, Might and Magic, that certainly proved you could put puzzles in the games, but I guess that was more riddle-based, the Might and Magic series, as opposed to puzzles. But this real-time 3D world, very much keen to the puzzle solving, which is it's fun, although sometimes it's a little unfair in this game, because you can be turned around at a moment's notice, and again, you see that compass there. You better pay pretty damn close attention to it, because with a snap of the fingers, you're going to be somewhere else in this dungeon, and you're not going to realize it. It's part of the very unfair nature of this game, and the dungeons themselves are enormous. For my review of Pool of Radiance, I spent quite a bit of time there telling everybody to please get out your graph paper and map this game, because that is half the enjoyment to the game. And if you want to get the most you can, and you want to enjoy the game as much as possible, you really should do something that nobody else bothers to do anymore, and that is map those gold box games, which are pretty simple to map, as they all adhere to 16 by 16 mazes for the most part. This Eye of the Bowl here is a little bigger than that. It's too big. It's too big. I remember my father, he definitely took the time to hand map this game back in the day, which that'll take you. That definitely will extend the gameplay, I will have to say. I will definitely say that. But when the game is as unfair as this one, and even if you are mapping them, it's very easy to not notice when your compass has gone from north to south and you've been turned around, yet you don't realize that, and you keep going on your graph paper. It's very frustrating when you're mapping a game and to suddenly be transported somewhere without knowing it, and you've messed up half your map because of that. I will say I don't advocate hand mapping this particular game, because it's just too big. It should be like Might and Magic 3 and have a good auto mapping feature built into the game, but it does not. You either have to map it yourself, or you have to look up the maps online, which I did. I found some empty maps online. I printed them up, and I just make sure I've not been turned around and such. Now, there is an AGA fan hack of this game, which puts the 256 VGA colors from the DOS version into the Amiga version. So I guess these people think that it's like the best of both worlds. So you'll have your graphics from the DOS version, but you have the sounds from the Amiga version. Plus, it also features an auto map. So it's one of those rare occasions online where you will see people point to this Amiga version and say, play this one. And they're adamant about playing the Amiga AGA version because it features this auto mapping feature as opposed to the DOS version. It's one of the rare occasions that you see people say, please play the Amiga version because it has like this extra feature. I just say print up the maps. Print up the maps. Don't get the AGA version. There's nothing special about the AGA version because this version here, this Amiga version, which was developed simultaneously in-house by Westwood, so it's like it was an original. You know, it's not an exact port if it was simultaneous. But whatever you want to call it, this is one of the finest ports ever from DOS to the Amiga. This is special. I really don't understand why so-called Amiga fans would recommend getting this hack that, yeah, you're an AGA, the too little too late chipset, showing the DOS graphics, or you could be here in OCS with one of the most beautiful set of 32 colors for each different section of the dungeon. It's its own palette of 32 colors. So right now we are in the sewers, and we're bathed in shit on the floor. We got this brick kind of walls. Lots of reds, lots of browns there. Eventually we go into the dwarves with nice stone. We got a lot of grays there. We go to the drow and it's purplish stuff. The palette changes the further you go into the dungeon. It's specially designed, catered to the Amiga. It takes advantage of the Amiga and shows you that even in a time of DOS VGA, this stuff was coming out for the Amiga, and this stuff was coming out in America, by the way. And it was every bit as good as the DOS version, maybe even better, and in fact this game is looked at as better than the DOS version because the DOS version had a couple flaws that the Amiga version fixed. So let me just recommend to you all to please play the OCS original Amiga version because it is special, and you will be proud of your Amiga when you see these games coming out in 1991 looking so damn good with the technology from 1985 during the time of VGA looking every bit as good, maybe better than those VGA games. You will be proud of your Amiga. Do not get no fan hack of this game to import the DOS version. Play the DOS version if you want those graphics. That is what I have to think about that. Let's get to some reviews. From September of 1991, Amiga World. If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, then the boys at FTL must be blushing the color of purple worms. For Eye of the Beholder, Strategic Simulations Incorporated 4995 is the sincerest form of Dungeon Master I've seen yet. Indeed, in some respects, it goes it one better. Eye of the Beholder, the first release in the publisher's new Legend series, is a mouse-driven dungeon role-playing game in 3 dimensions. If you want to pick up a dagger, you click on it. The dagger becomes a cursor, and then you click on the section of a character's inventory where you want it to go. If you want to experiment with an odd-looking section of a wall in a dead-end corridor, you simply click on that, and so on. Familiar stuff, to be sure, but it's the next best thing to being there. Your party of 4 has been commissioned to rid Waterdeep, a Forgotten Realms city, of something nasty. You start in the sewers, which promptly cave in behind you. From there, it's all downhill until you meet the unseemly horror lurking at the bottom. It's a great-looking game. Dungeon Master and Chaos Strikes Back use only 16 color screens. Eye of the Beholder uses 32, the de facto standard for Amiga games these days, and the results are decidedly impressive. Each of the 12 levels is rendered in its own delightfully mordant palette, and the living glow provided by the extra 16 colors catapults Eye of the Beholder into a new dimension of realism. Overall, the game struck me as a kinder, gentler Dungeon Master. Indeed, Eye of the Beholder would be a good starter game for adventurers who found Dungeon Master 2 daunting. Oh, somebody tell PacBilly and Jim that the Eye of the Beholder games, they're considered the easy games. These are pretty hard games, but yes, when compared to Dungeon Master and some other games in the genre, well, maybe it is, but overall, it's not easy. On the other hand, while beauty is certainly in the eye of the beholder, there's also some room for improvement. One save game position isn't enough. Character interaction and occasional text passages for atmosphere are nice additions, but too limited. Also, as in Dungeon Master, you can fight in only one direction at a time, so the troops in the rear have to stand there and take their lumps if they're cornered, which is exactly what's happening to me at the moment. None of the problems change the fact that this is a beautiful and intensely playable game. Onward and downward, just be sure to watch your back. I would like to expand upon one area where Amiga World got into it in terms of negativity for the game. They didn't like the fact that there's just not enough text in the game. This is why I would actually say that a game like Pool of Radiance is the overall better game compared to this one, is because those games, while the plot is definitely quite a bit of it is in the manual in the Gold Box games, well, you look up passages, but even beyond the manual, the text that you see in-game in the Gold Box games is much more immense than any text that you're going to see in this game, which we still haven't seen any text in this game to this point. It's very disheartening. These role-playing games, so much of them are about story and stuff that it really sticks with you. The games in the Pool of Radiance series, they really stick with you. And we're actually going to get the chance to finally see a tiny bit of text in this game, because there's so little of it. I'm actually going to perform it for you. Why not? Having regained his strength, the dwarf thanks you. I thought that I had met my death at the blade of that Drow. In battle, our king was grievously wounded, and the young prince kidnapped. I tried to stop the Drow, but alas, I was overcome. You have saved me from death. I wish there was some way to thank you, but I have nothing. I am alone, separated from my people during the battle. May I join you so that together we can search for my people? While the game is still memorable and it will stick with you, I mean, I'll never forget my dad playing this game and mapping it, and I'll never forget me sitting in the chair next to him while he did these things. And just like, I remember specifically when he got to this area of the game, because suddenly the palette changed from the red sewers and the muck of the sewers into this quite beautiful stone-looking stuff. I'll always remember telling him once, because he went back. For some reason, he went back up into the sewers, probably, just probably trying to figure things out or something. I remember telling him, can't we go back to the other area you were at because it looks better? I was like, can't we go there? Can't we go there? Like, I pestered him. Until he finally relented. He's like, all right, I'll go back there. He goes back to this lower level, and the disc starts loading. And guess what we hear as the disc starts loading? The terrible read-write error on the Amiga, which I dedicated my own video to. That very much depressed him. He was like, oh, God. And he still played the game. He went back and loaded up the game and mapped out the sewers some more, but I don't think he ever got a chance to finish the game because it got one of those read-write errors. That's the terrible thing about the Amiga, and I think we just had to either clean the disk or clean the disk drive, and that would have had him going some more. But unfortunately, my biggest memory of I Am the Beholder is the dreaded read-write error. But even when I played it later on by myself, and eventually I won against Xanathar there, like, the game is memorable. It will stick with you. It finds its own way to be memorable despite the lack of story. But there is a decidedly large lack of story in this game, which is quite unfortunate. Except here's another one as we meet the dwarfs. Ormond, spokesman of this clan. Of course, we have information of the location of the exits from these halls, but in our hour of need, I have no time to help you. However, you would be willing to help us. Do I hear quest? Armin begins. Our clan is descended from the Dwarves who built these great halls. Here, our ancestors lived in peace until hordes of evil creatures drove them out and into the realms of men and elves. On the surface, our numbers dwindled. Finally, our leader, King Tergal, gathered our people and led us underground in search of our ancestral home. Using secret knowledge passed down from the royal family, we finally discovered these stone-carved halls. The halls were vast, and we only explored a small portion before we had to make camp in an enclosed area decorated with a stone portal. While the camp slept, the stone portal flared with magical light. From the light, a horde of Drow charged us, led by the female they called Shindia. Both sides suffered many casualties, but in the end we were forced them to retreat into the portal from which they came. The battle was costly. King Tergal was wounded by a poisoned dagger and now lies in eternal sleep. Nothing our cleric can do will wake him. His only son, Prince Gergar, was captured by the invading Drow. With no member of the royal family among us, we no longer have access to their secret knowledge of the exits from these halls. Now we wait while our cleric heals our surviving warriors. Once prepared, we will try to rescue our prince and avenge the fall of Tergal. Our numbers are small, but we would rather fight to our deaths than abandon our prince to the Drow, unless, if your party were to rescue the Prince Tergal from the Drow and return him to us, we could give you information about the exits from these halls. You would have your information. We would have our prince, so will you help us? Cherish these very brief moments of a story in this game because it's all you're gonna get. There's no journal entries to go to, and this is pretty much it in terms of questing. This is the one side quest in the entire game, besides some hidden quests that aren't given any dialogue. This is it. This is all you have. Eat this stuff up. The game really does lack in terms of story, and my views of the Gold Box games will always be a little higher. A lot of people like to give the Gold Box games, or even the Might and Magic games, the title of hack and slash, which is not a friendly term usually when they say that. They're saying that to disparage the game because all you're doing, according to these people, is hitting the attack button over and over. You're hacking and you're slashing, and there's not much more to the games. That is what they would have you believe. If the Gold Box games, if Might and Magic, if those games are hack and slash, then what the heck is this one, really? Because all of those games feature incredible story to go with the game. Even in Might and Magic case, where most of the game might not feature that much story, but they choose their moments to just unload it all on you, and it just really sticks with you because of the way it is presented. The Gold Box games are a continual inflection of story. This Eye of the Beholder here is the true hack and slash game because there really just isn't enough story. Now, occasionally, you can come back to this area here with the Dwarven Cleric who will resurrect certain people if you find bones, and again, this is another chance for you to experience just a tiny bit of the story. So while I do love the game, I will, it's definitely, it gets marked down with me when I look at the larger pictures of RPGs, because it's just, the story is just not strong enough within the game. There's not enough role-playing going on inside of the game. It's too much wandering around these walls that are all the same. Now, it does definitely has variety in terms of the enemies. Every floor features a variety of different enemies. Every time you change the floors, you'll get a new set of enemies. They are all incredible to look at and to see. So the game keeps it fresh, and it changes the palette and everything. So listen, this game is a classic for a reason. It finds its ways to still be memorable despite the lack of story. But again, it's got a lack of story. The game was good enough to come back to it in a later issue from 1991 for the All-Star Games of 1991. The season is almost over. It's time once again to assemble the dream team from among the year's best games releases. We scouted the best, put them to the test, and came up with the top plays of 1991. As with other sports, at Amiga World, we choose our all-star lineup by ballot. We choose our choosers for their experience. Between them, our 91 Amiga World Games panelists have played probably every game released for the Amiga this year. That is, since we chose last year's top 10. This is a top 10 list, but they also go deeper on after the top 10 to go into the top 20. So, it's top 10, but honorable mentions galore in this issue. The Amiga World All-Star Balloteers heartily recommend all the games listed here, saying if you play them, you'll have fun. Number 10, Eye of the Beholder Role-Playing Adventure, the first release in SSI's new Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Legends series of first-person. What you see is what you get in role-playing games. This gorgeous adventure is set in the labyrinths beneath the Forgotten Realms city of Waterdeep. The Lord of Waterdeep has commissioned your band of adventurers to find and eliminate the source of growling evil about the city. You and your band of up to 5 other characters must fight your way through 12 torturous levels of monsters, traps, and tricks. The graphics are excellent. The game is exciting. Outperforms Dungeon Master, which is superior graphics and storyline, an excellent example of the right way to port an MS-DOS product to the Amiga. Eye of the Beholder is a must-buy for any fantasy role-playing gamer. The You Are There graphics and eerie sound is enough to keep you on the edge of your seat. I didn't have to read the manual to play and understand it. I even give you a couple hints there, give you an idea of its placement in the games category here. Now, number 10 is at the very top of the top 10, but the Dungeon Master 2, despite it being better than Dungeon Master 2 went to number 9 there. I don't think many people remember the Dungeon Master 2 very much, but it somehow got its way above it. And Ishido, The Way of the Stones, looks like a Shanghai, Mahjong type of game there. Awesome by Psygnosis is number 7. Only the one there is actually European. All the other ones are American in design. Let's flip through some more pages here. We see The Killing Game Show, Prince of Persia, Indianapolis 500. We see Wings as number 2, and of course Lemmings takes the top spot for 1991, but there are some runner-ups, including The Secret of Monkey Island, now regarded as one of the best Amiga games of all time. It is number 16 in the honorable mentions list. That's something. I'll actually be covering The Secret of Monkey Island very soon on this channel, for a heads up there. Now, the fight that you see before you is an interesting one because it's one of the very few boss battles in this game, and I think it's actually the only one, as a matter of fact, the only forced one anyway, besides your eventual encounter with Xanathar. And there might be one other one that you can face depending on how you treat the situation. But this game does not feature enough boss battles, I would have to say. But that's a memorable one right there. It also gives you a chance, again, to read into some of the very, very small plot elements that are in this game. These guys, these little birds, I made a joke to Stygian on Twitter. I'm like, can you get your bird friends to get off my case? These damn birds. It's a great opportunity to show you guys some of the combat elements in this game, which, compared to the Gold Box games, combat's awful, because in the Gold Box games, it's very, very strategic combat. It's just great. I think the Gold Box games are still to this day one of the best combat-oriented role-playing games there ever was. But this one does have more strategic elements than, say, a Might and Magic. Because as you see right there, I took Stygian, I moved her into the front row. This is a great way to get some of your frontline characters off the front line so they won't get killed on you. It's also a bit of a role-playing element, and now I have the cleric who, traditionally in these games, you're gonna try to shield the cleric so she can heal your players, but everybody forgets that the cleric is actually quite the fighter. In traditional advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the cleric can have a hell of a punch with their mace weapons there. Putting the cleric in the top row, it's not a bad idea at all. Stygian, you can, if you pay close attention, Stygian gets some great hits when she's up there in front. So since this game is not like a Might and Magic game where maybe all of your characters can reach the battle and attack and cast spells and everything, since only your first front row characters have the ability to use weapons, this is your chance to get the other characters involved by right-clicking on them. You can change the order at any time, and that is probably the most strategic element that goes into the combat in this game. If you learn this tactic, it will help you on your journey quite extraordinarily. And the only other strategic tactic I can think of is the sidestepping of the enemies. If you get your strafing down, you can oftentimes completely avoid an enemy attack while attacking them yourself. It's a bit of a cheaty kind of element in its feel, but even, I'll be using it too eventually. That's definitely it's in how you use it. It's how cheesy you make it. Honestly, I try not to make that too cheesy of a thing. But the placement of your characters, the how you move in the combat, along with your spells, that is what makes up the strategic elements of this game, which definitely makes it better than an Ultima, better than a Might and Magic, but less than a Pool of Radiance, I would have to say. Check out some more reviews of the time period from Computer Gaming World. This personalized combat perspective undoubtedly earned much of the praise for CGW's Hall of Fame member Dungeon Master. In a very real sense, Eye of the Beholder is Dungeon Master meets veteran storyteller George MacDonald. Eye of the Beholder is a stunningly, brilliantly graphic, and agonizingly tricky foray into the world of 3D perspective CRPGs. Now, parties must deal face-to-face with the messy consequences of the zombies, Drow, displacer beasts, and assorted other nasties which will dwell in the sewers and catacombs beneath Waterdeep. Notwithstanding the plumbing problems such creatures must create, the hero's eye view of the action ensures that even lesser creatures will seem formidable and no longer impotent. Digressions from the main task. Helpful in this regard is that the game does not allow the party to ever be able to determine how many hit points an opponent has. Indeed, the question of hit points is rendered almost irrelevant in the game. Health, then, becomes more of a question of an overall sense of well-being. Battle, instead of diminishing simply to race between numbers, becomes, as it should be, a desperate fight to the death. The game's fiction is fairly standard. Evil is plaguing Waterdeep. Xanathar, the Beholder, and must be found and deterred. In practical terms, Eye of the Beholder features a quest for 7 stone objects, none necessary to complete the game. Actually, Computer Gaming World, 1 is necessary to complete the game. Incredible visual delights, tricky puzzles, and realistic interactions finally, and at long last, begin to create the sense of a real world. And Computer AD&D. Let us take a tiny break to look at the left here at some of the top 25 in terms of computer games, in terms of actual sales. These are based on actual sales numbers, which I don't know, one of the reasons I always love looking at Computer Gaming World is because this is, if you want to know what the people playing computer games, what they were into back in the day, at least in America, this is what you look at. Guess what was number 1? An educational game. Mavis teaches typing. Again, I cover a couple educational games from time to time, and people treat them as if they are beneath you, when historically speaking, they are absolutely relevant and worth discussing. Number 1 in terms of top selling anything. Number 1 is an educational game, a typing game. And It's beneath you. You don't want to advertise that. You don't want to tell anybody about that. Educational game, absolutely worth talking about, absolutely worth discussing, absolutely worth showing. Number 1. Number 2 is Chess Master. Look at these things. PGA Tour Golf, The Bard's Tale, The Secret of Monkey Island, Buck Rogers Countdown to Doomsday, The Hunt for Red October, Golden Axe. Golden Axe is the only side-scroller I see at first glance here that I know of is Golden Axe. Again, you're not going to find Commander Keen in here, YouTubers of today. No Commander Keen. No Zool. None of these games, none of these platforming games, you're not going to find, that was not a thing back in the day. These people online today are making a grave mistake in terms of history, at least from the America's perspective. Again, if you are an Amiga person and you're in Europe, things were very different, and you guys did, love your platformers, and you love the Zool, and, Super Frog, you love those type of games. Over there, it was a different story. That's worth talking about from the European perspective. But there are Americans today covering DOS games and stuff, and Americans today who don't think the Amiga was anything in America. Again, this magazine here, Computer Gaming World, covered all computers. The Amiga was definitely in their rotation, most certainly. They covered the Amiga. Secret of the Silver Blades. Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds. Pool of Radiance is, in terms of sales, is above its sequels. TV Sports Football from CinemaWare. Again, a game that none of the Europeans bothered to watch that I just covered a couple weeks ago. TV Sports Football above John Madden Football. So can anyone honestly look at that list and tell me there's not something seriously wrong with the YouTube world today and the people that are covering these games from when they were little children back in the day and all they could do is play the shareware games because they were free? They are making big mistakes in not covering a lot of the games that you see here. Well, you look at that list and it's so obvious. It's so obvious. A huge piece of history is being utterly ignored and forgotten about. And in terms of the Amiga, in terms of history too, this in America, those are the kind of games that sold here as well. We're very much like the IBM crowd. We happen to have the Amiga, and I think we got a better deal. We got the better games. We got the better software, I believe. Of course, keep in mind that that list there, top 25 based on the combined sales of all formats. So that includes the Amiga, everybody. Titles of the EAD top 25 reflect 90-day unit sales ending 2/28/91 of EAD, which distributes the products of 14 leading independent software publishers. In conclusion, at long last, IBM owners need no longer complain. They now have a game like Dungeon Master. I didn't realize Dungeon Master was never even released for DOS. I guess, hey, guess what, everybody? Atari ST and Amiga exclusives, I guess. A magnificent game that promises to be only the first in a long, well, we hope very long, line of releases. Computer Gaming World themselves get the credit. No individual, apparently, gets the credit for that review. Now, from later on in the very same issue, we have a review of I the Beholder from Scorpia. I don't know how many of people listening know about Scorpia, but she was a... I don't even know. Was it a she or not? I don't know if that was a pseudonym or was it an actual female. I'm not sure about the whole story of Scorpia, but it's a story there. Scorpia was a reviewer who specialized in RPGs for the longest time, working for Computer Gaming World. She was not very well liked by the designers of these games, and she was immortalized in a couple games, as a matter of fact, via villains. Now, one I'm thinking of is from Might and Magic 3. There is a very, very unflattering monster called Scorpia, and I know there's another one too. I believe the other one's even more iconic in its form. It's because this woman, she would write scathing reviews. This is why a lot of great games, as a matter of fact, are looked down upon, is because of this one reviewer and lots of complaints. Like she was a critic in the worst senses. Think New York. Think, there's a Broadway play, and your worst ideas of what a critic is, the most snobby bastard you can think of, just finds anything to nitpick. That was Scorpia. It got to the point where the magazine themselves would in the exact issue, they would have to make their own remarks about Scorpia and say, well, this person, she doesn't speak for. Scorpia is an expert and respected adventure game expert. CGW is pleased to be able to provide this form for her distinctive and often controversial perspective. That is Computer Gaming's World thoughts on Scorpia. But they would oftentimes, in the very same issue that Scorpia just destroyed a game, they would be there to say, no, we've got our own opinions, and we like this game. That's how bad it would get. So by this point, you have Computer Gaming World giving their own separate review, which comes first, and then Scorpia gets another shot at it later on. To me, it's very funny, and as I'm diving back into some of the Computer Gaming World reviews, I look forward to reading some of her perspective on some of these. She's actually quite a lot like me in certain terms, in that she's a very, very, very long-winded person, and she's passionate. But again, she's way too anal in certain respects, and she outright dismisses some of the most noteworthy games of all time, and that is something I gotta give her some shit for. That I had Beholder the first in a new series of AD&D games from SSI's complete departure from the standard Gold Box series in terms of graphics, sound effects, interface, mode of play, puzzle orientation, and combat. This is an all-dungeon expedition. No towns, no wilderness. Nevertheless, the Beholder avoids visual boredom by giving different levels different representations. Orange, brown bricks for the sewer levels, gray stone for Dwarf country, dark red for Drow areas, mossy green in the Tri-Kreen territory, and so on. What really makes it work, however, what really gives you the feeling of being in an actual dungeon, is the remarkable and ingenious use of sound effects. Best results are obtained with a sound card. No shit, Sherlock. Not merely creaking doors and dripping water, but insidious little noises, which indicate that something is out there and coming closer every second. It's a creepy experience to be walking down a corridor, hearing a faint rustle, or tramping feet in the distance. Where's it coming from? The long passage heads, that side branch, or is it perhaps a deadly enemy sneaking up from behind? Enhancing play further is the fact that each type of monster has its own attack sound to be made during combat. Few will forget the deep-throated wow of the displacer beats, the tilling screech of skeleton lords, of the nerve-wracking chittering of the poisonous spiders. So far, I'm liking this, besides the sound card thing. So just why are you in this dungeon anyway? Need you ask? As usual, there are evil doings to be stopped, and as usual, you just volunteered for the dirty work. This time around, though, your party is a little smaller than you're accustomed to having, at least initially. 4 is the number here instead of the typical 6 of the Gold Box series, so choose wisely. Well, guess who recommends using the built-in modify command to alter your characters at the start of a game? Yeah, Scorpia. I'm on the same side as the world's most notorious role-playing reviewer of all time. She says, screw that. Just give yourself some max levels. For all that, combat in this game is not excessive. This isn't your typical gold box hack and slash jaunt through myriads of encounters. While there is fighting enough to keep things lively, it doesn't become tedious, except perhaps on the Gunku levels. I will disagree with her on that. I think this is by far more of a hack and slash game. It doesn't matter how many enemies there are. All you are doing is hacking and slashing, compared to the gold box games, which feature story, actual, humanized elements of script. That is not hack and slash, Scorpia. It's not. This game, all you're doing is roaming around endlessly and attacking things in a hack and slash manner. This is by far a more hack and slash oriented game than any gold box game ever was. What is incredibly annoying, however, is the fact that you can't do anything about attacks from the rear or side. This is a definite weakness in the combat engine. It's ridiculous that people in the rear can be attacked without any means of fighting back. Definitely agree on that one. Spellcasting, especially in real time, is a bit awkward. First you have to click on the spell book, then on the spell level you want, and finally on the spell itself. That's 3 moves to get off a spell, which is certainly too much, particularly when you can only handle one character at a time. There's only one save position. It's difficult to understand why a game that's sports so many puzzles requiring a lot of experimentation allows for only one save. Worst by far, though, is the ending. Not since Sentinel Worlds has any CRPG had so abrupt and unrewarding a finish. You kill the Beholder. You get a text box of congratulations. You are dropped out of the program to DOS. End of game. This is outrageous. SSI is already hearing about it from other players, and with good reason. There is no justification for such a cheap ending. They claim another disc would have been necessary to put in a real ending. If that's the case, put in the extra disc, or else whittle down the fancy beginning. This isn't nearly as important as a reward at the end of the game. No player enjoys slogging through a dungeon, winning the big battle, and then receiving a slap in the face for all of his or her efforts. Despite all that, as a first-time effort with a new engine, the Beholder has a lot going for it, especially in the graphics sound department. No other game I've played to date has ever given me such a sense of really being in a dungeon, and that alone is worth the price of admission. I have to say I am quite impressed with her review there, and other than her pot shots at the Gold Box games, I highly enjoyed reading Scorpia's opinion about Eye of the Beholder there. Yes, should be noted that, Scorpia complained about the game's ending, and again, that was a big complaint, and according to Scorpia, they said we couldn't do it because we need an extra disc. Now, I've heard from other sources that they indeed had created the ending to the game and just chose to leave it out. Well, the Amiga version's a bit different, actually. Another reason why this is probably the definitive version of Eye of the Beholder is because, they learned their lesson from those reviews and from the people. I guess apparently they said, nobody's ever going to get to the end anyway. Why bother putting it on an extra disc? They should know that magazines like Computer Gaming World especially, they had a rule that you can't review a game unless you finish it, which, I wish that rule was still in effect today. Not that you can't review a game in a good way, having not beat it, but that kind of a standard, if it was put on today for these YouTubers out there, which don't really dive in as much as some of them probably should, unless you say it's a first impressions kind of video, which is fine. But to fully review a game and to make judgments on it, I really respect Computer Gaming World, because they made their reviewers. They had to defeat the game. You want to review it? you better be able to defeat it. So they were definitely special in terms of their philosophy on game reviews. But they should have known back then. Should have known their ending was going to get out in the likes of those reviewers from a special 1996 issue of Computer Gaming World. Top 15 least rewarding endings of all time. Number 2, I the Beholder. You kill the Beholder. Get a text box victory message and drop immediately to DOS. I will say that thankfully the Amiga version rectifies this situation. So, despite my traps, you bet the yearlings of the Lords of Waterdeep managed to make it here after all. How unfortunate for you. How sad for me as well. I enjoyed immensely watching you fight my minions stumbling through my traps. Of course, I am responsible for creating the traps. You, of course, cannot be allowed to interfere with my brilliant plan. Surrender to me now. Perhaps I will grant you mercy. Oh yeah, this fight here. If you were to surrender, all that does is drop all of your possessions to make it even easier for him to kill you. This Beholder, it's a hell of a tough fight, a worthy final boss battle indeed. I've seen people defeat him via the side stepping methods. It took me a while to remember exactly how I'm supposed to use this damn wand here. He killed me a few times before I finally understood what I'm supposed to do. So as we near the end of this review, I'm just going to give you my final thoughts on this classic game. It is indeed a classic game, a must-play, I would say. A definitive title in the CRPG genre, a fantastic example of an Amiga game ported right, ported perhaps even better than the original DOS version. I honestly believe that. I really think this is something special in terms of the Amiga in particular. There's no shame in this game. No shame in not having the original DOS version here. It's special. I will never forget my dad playing this game, me watching him play this game, that ReadWrite era that eventually came to this game, and coming back to it many years later to enjoy it thoroughly. I will say that in comparisons to the more strategic combat oriented with storyline, heavy story elements, the Gold Box games, I definitely give the Gold Box games a tad more credit. I kind of wish those hadn't died out. Kind of wish those had been, updated a little more. I wish that this would have had a little more in terms of actual story, and it makes me a little sad for what was no longer to be once this became such a success. It was a huge success, selling well over 100,000 copies, and the hefty price tags at times over 100,000. I think like 150,000 or something like that. You add those price tags up to those unit numbers, and you get a game that made quite a lot of money back in the day. Now here we have the text ending, which is also severely altered from the original DOS version. Again, originally you'd see a little bit of text in the DOS version, and it would then quit immediately to DOS. But even this Amiga version has the text altered before you actually go and you see a cinematic. Now, while this plays, I would like to point you all to a couple other videos that I've done in the role-playing genre. The most recent one is the utterly wonderful, fantastic Pool of Radiance for the Amiga. It's just superb. One of the best ports of all time to the Amiga. It blows the original away in all senses. It's so awesome. Pool of Radiance. We have Might and Magic 3. Again, New World Computing. New World Computing did this one, late 1992-ish game for the Amiga. And again, it's pretty much just as good as the DOS original. A little less in the graphics department, but it's all there. A 1985 computer, and it's all still there. It's utterly fantastic. And finally, how about Uninvited? Uninvited is not a role-playing game. It is an adventure game, but it's very special in its style and its presentation, which I think a lot of the role-playing people would get quite a kick out of. I very much hope you will all check out those videos. This might be the last review for Season 3. If it is, I will see you all very early in December for the start of Season 4. Hope you all enjoyed this video. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.